What's up, my friends in the film fandom, wherever you may be and however you may be watching? Thank you so much for giving us just a little bit of your time here to talk about one of the classic films of all time tonight. One that is definitely one of the movies that made the 80s possibly the greatest decade of film ever. Ever. I'll fight to the death. I'll die on this hill. I 100% will. But a little short staff tonight. Jeremy couldn't make it tonight. That's all right. Cora couldn't make it tonight, but she's had a lot going on lately. We talked about that. But don't worry. I've got Tex here. He's the one guy with a back hairier than a werewolf. The shape below starts taking
How did you know? How did you know? What the
Casey sent me the pictures. Yeah.
Damn it. Okay. You got me.
Damn it, Casey. Put my shit out there like that. But yeah, don't worry. We've got plenty to talk about. I've got plenty of trivia, plenty to go over about this film. And boy, is this one a banger. I do not have my notes ready either. I am way off for had a few last minute adjustments I had to make before the stream. But just so you guys know, here's how we're going to kind of start this out. We're going to talk about the director first. Then we'll break down the cast as usual and the plot. We'll talk about the special effects if they hold up a little bit. We'll talk about the possibility of a remake. You know, there was one in the works. We'll talk about how that has been kind of a weird road here in a minute. And then, of course, we'll end up with some trivia just like we usually do. But let's see. Right now, we're here to talk, of course, about An American Werewolf in London. And as it's still bringing up my notes, man, I really thought that I drug it out just enough. There we go. An American Werewolf in London is a 1981 comedy horror film written and directed by the great John Landis. The film stars David Naughton, Jenny Agutter, Griffin, Dunne, and John Woodvine. The title is a cross between An American in Paris and The Werewolf in London. The film's plot follows two American backpackers named David and Jack, who are attacked by a werewolf while traveling in England, causing David to become a werewolf under the next full moon. An American Werewolf in London was released in the U.S. by Universal Pictures on August 21st of 1981. It was a critical and commercial success, winning the 1981 Saturn Award for Best Horror Film and the first ever Academy Award for Best Makeup. We'll talk about that a lot. Since its release, it has become a cult classic. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 89% based on reviews from 63 critics, with an average rating of 7.8 out of 10. The site's critical consensus states, quote, terrifying and funny in almost equal measure, John Landis' horror comedy crosses genres while introducing Rick Baker's astounding makeup effects. A sequel called An American Werewolf in Paris was released by Hollywood Pictures in 1997, but it received mostly negative reviews upon its release. You know, Tex, obviously, I mean, you, Jeremy, the horror aficionados of the channel, this is one of the movies that a lot of people will cite as something that got them into the horror, special effects, bloody gore genre, because it is a pretty well balanced film for a lot of different kind of styles of audience. Give me kind of a brief thought overall on the film before we get into too much of the heavier discussion.
Yeah, this is one of the 80s films, like you were just talking about, especially of the more scary variety. Because of this movie, a lot of other B movies were allowed to be made and exist, and it cleared the path for a whole lot that was done in film. Is it my favorite werewolf movie? No. My favorite would be The Howling, but this one's not far behind. This one's number 2 easily. But it's just an overall solid film. The comedy hits. It's even for somebody with my sense of humor, this humor lands in this movie. And it's just a fun movie to watch. It's an hour and 30-something minutes, and it goes by in a flash. I mean, it goes by quickly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for me, look, it's sometimes really hard to make a horror comedy that isn't too much comedy. I mean, you want to lean on the comedy part for the most part because I understand the interest in doing that because you can appeal to a wider audience in comedy. Let's face it, the horror community is kind of it's very niche-y in the film community. And also it can be a little brutal, but if you can walk the line, you will get a movie like An American Werewolf in London. There is some funny parts. I think it's way more horror than comedy, but it's billed as a comedy horror. It's got its funny parts. It's got its interesting kind of humorous situations. But this movie is one of the handful of movies in the horror genre comedy that actually hits kind of the perfect balance between them. Now, what is that balance? I don't know. I can't say it's 60-40. I can't say it's 50-50. I can't say it's 70-30 because it really does depend on the film itself. And that kind of depends on on the story you're telling, the characters. So it's got to be carefully crafted. It's a different ratio that works for every movie, but this one, it really does land kind of in that sweet spot. It lands in that butter zone for what the film is, for the story, for the characters, and all that. And I watched it again last night, and I'm like, yeah, this movie looks dated as hell, but damn, it's still great to watch. It's a lot of fun. There's some obvious, like, it was made, it came out in 1981. I think they shot it like in the early 80s, or in the spring of 1981. But I mean, even for that time frame, there was some really great work done in this film. I mean, John Landis obviously had already kind of established himself as a director by then. You had David Naughton, who was kind of becoming a star. I think at this point, the only thing he had really done is like the Dr. Pepper commercials, which a lot of people remember him from. But I mean, he hadn't really done a whole lot. But they initially cast some unknown actors to kind of put the focus on the story of the characters. I think it helped out a lot. And I think this movie is just stunningly good. But let's take a minute first. I mean, let's talk about the director. Let's talk about John Landis. I mean, his career, there's a lot of different ways you can approach his career. For those of you who know about the whole thing with the Twilight Zone movie.
Twilight Zone.
Yeah, you guys can go and investigate that on your own. I don't really want to give an opinion on that because it's been a while since I really looked into it. But I mean, I could go down the list of John Landis directed and influenced things. And let me pull up a list real quick. So I know a few of them off the top of my head, something I've seen.
Well, I could.
But I mean, his filmography is something to sneeze at. What do you think of John Landis as a director?
Well, some of your favorite comedy films came from this guy, whether it's Three Amigos, Coming to America. Obviously, he did American Werewolf in Paris. There was some other. Was it Animal House that he did? Was it Animal House?
Animal House and Kentucky Fried Movie were the first two that he did that got him a lot of noise.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Those. I mean, Animal House is one of. If it wasn't for Animal House, you wouldn't have like the American Pie franchise or the Van Wilders or any of the teen sex comedy, genre that's out there. I mean, he basically he didn't create it with Animal House, but maybe he perfected it. I think is a fair statement to say. But I mean, prolific director, especially for that time period. So many films that he did, and yeah, like you said, the Twilight Zone thing. That's a whole podcast to itself. That's a barrel of monkeys. But I mean, this guy's one of the '80s directors. He came from nowhere, and he made so many movies that are classics now that you may not even realize that he had his hands on. You know what I mean? Yeah,
it's. I mean, considering how long he's been around, his list of movies is relatively short. Granted, a lot of that comes because, after the Twilight Zone movie, he was a little bit of persona non grata for quite some time. But he still managed to spit out some bangers. I mean, his first directorial debut was a movie called Schlock in 1973. I've never seen that one. I don't really know what it's about. It looks like kind of a B-rate. It says a 73 American comedy horror film written, directed by, and starring filmmaker John Landis. So that was definitely some guerrilla filmmaking. But then in 1977, he hits us with Kentucky Fried Movie, which most real film fans will tell you is one of the top 10 or 15 funniest movies ever made. Then Animal House, which in and of itself is a classic. Then The Blues Brothers in 1980, again, a classic film. Then he hits us with American Werewolf in London. Then he hits us with Trading Places. For all of the problems surrounding Twilight Zone, the movie, which came out in 83. Again, you guys can go read about those on your own. That's actually still a really, really good movie to watch. Then he gave us Spies Like Us, which I think is one of these seminal comedies of the 80s, a movie that I've been wanting to do a breakdown on for a while. I think we'll have to get to that one soon. He was a writer and executive producer on Clue. We just talked about that a couple of weeks ago. And of course, he gave us Coming to America, another great 80s movie. I know that Sylvester Stallone says he doesn't like this movie a whole lot. I actually thought this movie was a lot of fun. He directed a comedy called Oscar back in 1991 with Sylvester Stallone. It's based in like 1930s New York, and Sylvester Stallone is like a mafia boss who just ascended to like the boss because his dad died or something. He's trying to go straight, and it's just kind of this almost slapstick comedy of him trying to go straight, which is really funny. And it gives Sylvester Stallone a chance to really focus on some comedic stuff, which he's surprisingly good at. I think it's a much better movie than a lot of people give it credit for. He did Beverly Hills Cop 3. Sorry, I can't give any love on that with John Landis. That movie's horrible. The only thing I like about that movie is they filmed it in the amusement park that I grew up going to, so about 30 minutes from my house. So, but yeah, that wasn't a good movie. And then eventually,
I don't think I saw Beverly Hills Cop 3 after. I think I quit after 2. I think I made it. 3.
Yeah, you're not missing anything. There was a lot to not like about the movie, but he did write, direct, and produce the Blues Brothers 2000, which in 1998 with John Goodman. Look, that wasn't a.
I like that
movie.
one.
It wasn't.
That was
great.
A fun movie to watch.
Yeah, it wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. And he's done a lot of stuff that just largely has gone. It's largely gone just unnoticed. I mean, some stuff I've never even heard of until I'm looking at it right now. But and he's even done a little bit of acting, but I could go through a lot of his acting stuff. I'm not going to. A bunch of television. I mean, the Weird Science TV show Sliders, which was a great TV show in the 90s. I used to watch the hell out of that. Let's see, Masters of Horror. I mean, he does like the horror stuff. And then obviously, I mean, we'll talk about his music videos. He did the Spies Like Us video for Paul McCartney. But more important than that, he did what I think is the best music video that has and will ever be made in Michael Jackson's Thriller. Say what you will about Michael Jackson, but that video is just. He also directed the black and white video for Michael Jackson in the 90s. That was a good video as well. But the Thriller video is by far and away the best music video ever, and I mean ever. I've argued this point over on Drew's show on Derailed many times. I will continue to argue this point. But I mean, John Landis, I mean, you can't shit on the guy. And it's rubbed off on his son a little bit, too. His son's managed to start a pretty decent directing career for himself as well. I mean, John Landis, he's a great director. He's someone that I think we should all show a little bit of love for. Like I said, Twilight Zone stuff notwithstanding, that's kind of a whole interesting thing that you can go look at and decide how you want to assign blame on that. But yeah, I mean, John Landis is an absolute. I mean, he's a star. It's really sad that he has everybody knows him, everybody loves him, but it's really sad that he's never fully gotten the credit that I think he deserves for the good work that he's put out there because of a couple of the things that have gone on over the course of his career. I don't know. Am I wrong, Jax?
John Landis gets all the credit in the world in the horror side of movie fandom. On the non-horror side, he probably is just another whatever. But considering he helped provide probably the greatest werewolf, or not even just werewolf, but creature transformation in this movie here. I mean, go back and watch this movie, and then look at any other werewolf or creature transformation since. Nothing else holds up compared to this. It's the way it's shot, the way it's felt. You can't not just go, whenever you see the hand, like the palm of the hand is stretching. It's like, that's not supposed to happen that way. What's going on here? It's just like, look at that. It's like, oh my God. It's like, are you the Blob? I mean, what's going on here? I mean, if it wasn't for John Landis shooting at all of that was practical effects and in camera. That's what's so incredible. That's why he gets credit on the horror side of this. Because, there were many. I mean, you can go back to, let's see, the first Wolfman was what, the early 40s or like the late 30s or something like that. So they've been doing Wolfman. Yeah, because I don't think Wolfman came in the first round of Universal Monsters. I think he was I want to say like 1942 or something. I'm not sure. But either way, there was almost 5 decades up till this point of werewolf and monster creations, and then this thing comes out and blows the doors off of it. And I mean, to this day, excluding CGI transformations, there's never been a better creature scene. And I mean, all credit in the world to John Landis on that deal, because he made it look real. Whenever David's laying there on the floor, I'm burning up, and rips his clothes off and just starts screaming and just agonizing pain. You hurt for the guy while you're watching it. And I mean, it's, this movie's not spectacular the way that it's shot or everything else, but it as a whole is tremendous. And, he does not get the credit that he deserves, unfortunately. But, it's the way it goes. He has his fans, though.
Yeah, this movie it is shot very, very well. I mean, for even by today's standards, there's some shots that are pretty amazing. Now, again, the makeup in spots doesn't hold up very well, but that's not because Rick Baker wasn't amazing at what he did. It's just because that's how it was done in 1981. I mean, now it's a bit different. Now it's a kind of a combination of practical makeup and CGI and stuff like that. But I mean, but some of these shots, the angles, the cinematography at all was fantastic. Yeah, I cannot sing the praises of John Landis enough. Like I said, I really do wish his career was looked at in a bit of a different light. But there's a couple of things that always jump out at people, fair or unfair. I mean, whatever your opinions on those things may be. But bottom line is, he's a great director. He's given us some of my favorite films. But let's move on now and talk about the cast. I mean, David Naughton. Let me pull my notes here again. David Naughton and Griffin Dunne play the two backpacking Americans that are going through England. It's one of those moments of just kind of perfect casting, getting these two guys that work well together, and not being tempted to go after the stars, because that was something that they had kind of pressured Landis on doing early on in the production. I'll talk about that when we get to the trivia part about who could have played these roles. But it's you can't go wrong with any of this casting. I mean, these guys were great. The girl, why am I drawing a blank on her name? It's Jenny Agutter. She's 80s gorgeous. She is really kind of truly beautiful. She's not one of those women that's just hot for the sake of being hot. I mean, she's a very attainable, very normal, very beautiful woman, and you can believe her in the role. I mean, and then obviously you have a guy like John Woodvine, who was already a very established theater and television actor over in the UK. I mean, is there anything about this casting you didn't like? Because not very known at the time, except for maybe John Woodvine, but I mean, the cast really does kind of make the film, along with the cool story and the special effects. Do you agree?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the cast of this film, none of these are like household name superstars that you're going, oh my God, so and so's in this movie, whatever. But good horror doesn't need Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise to be good. I mean, you have more of these movies that make these stars that star in these films. And, David Naughton, his comedic timing in this film, whenever he wakes up, and he's naked and, he's hiding in the bush. Hey, little boy, come over here. I'll give you £1 for those balloons. I don't know you. I'll give you £2. I'll blah, 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 whatever. Right. And, it's just, when he's standing there in that woman's red coat after he's running like Usain Bolt and just yoink, grabs it and keeps on going. It's just shots like this that make him the star of this movie. It's a, the girlfriend, what's her name? Julie, or what was her name in this film? I can't remember now.
I'm drawing a blank. Give me a second.
The nurse, the main nurse that he bangs out.
I forget her actual.
She was really good in this film, and I mean, Alex. I think this is a whole movie.
The nurse is Alex. Alex Price is her name.
Okay, yeah. She's really good in this film. She gives it levity to. I mean, you have David over here who's literally losing his mind. He's seeing his zombified dead best friend next to him, and then you've got he's seeing. I mean, who dreams about Nazi werewolves? I mean, you got to be on some crazy next level LSD to come up with this stuff. I mean, one kind of looks like an 8 one. It's like, what do you? I mean, I don't know. My only thought was, tell me if you thought this or not. When they go to the slaughtered lamb, you see those guys throwing darts. They're wearing those same kind of green army coats without all the memorabilia and stuff on it, all the medals and stuff. I think that may have, like, the subtext in this movie. He had those people in his brain, and he just put Nazis together or something because of the look. I don't know. That's what I've always thought when I see this film. But I mean, the cast in this film it's what it needs to be. I mean, yeah, John Woodvine, the doctor in this film, he's very understated, but very effective in this movie. He, besides David Naughton, he may be my favorite performance because he's just trying to save the guy. You know, he's trying to investigate it. He doesn't believe it. Kind of playing the, I guess you could call him the Dr. Loomis of this movie if you really wanted to. You know
well, he's a convert. Yeah, and he's a convert in the story too, because like a lot of people don't believe David when he's telling the story about how it was, how I was attacked by this whatever, and they're like, I don't know if I believe you. He's the only one that says, well, let me look into this just to make sure, while everybody else is writing David off as a quack, and he's the one that kind of finally gets to the answers, and that's why you find him. And that's why you find him at some point kind of saying, okay, I'm going to go back there and help David now. And eventually help, you know, the girl Alex and, you know, into whatever they're doing. Right. So yeah, I do. He's definitely a more interesting character arc. I mean, not as interesting as David, obviously, but I mean, he's definitely a more significant character.
Well, no.
Whereas Alex, I mean, as much as I like her performance and, you know, think she was good in the role, she is kind of a typical, you know, like, I don't even want to say Mary Sue, just the damsel in distress. You know, she's just kind of, she's David's love interest, but at the same time, she's the monster that the monster side of David is putting in danger. That kind of thing.
Okay, tell me if this has ever happened, because this has never happened with me. But before I've laid down with a woman, has she ever protested you? I've been with 7 lovers, 3 of them were one night stand. Has she ever given you her rundown before you banged her out? Has that ever happened?
Well, generally speaking, that's not a conversation that I would ever have prior to my first intimacy with a lady friend. But because I remember watching it, admittedly, before last night, it had been a couple years since I had seen this movie. I mean, I've seen it several times before. But as I was watching it last night, I was trying to analyze a few things, and I'm thinking to myself, I was like, I've heard this conversation 100 times before watching this movie. Because I've literally probably seen this movie 100 times, but I'm like, it never occurred to me. Like, why would you say that? It's like,
right. Well,
and you got to remember, this is the way that 80s movies were paced was often not logical compared to the way.
Oh no, of course not. No,
compared to the way that they organize and structure the pacing of films now. Because how many of these 80s movies have we done? One of the knocks that one of Jeremy's favorite movies, the Star Wars prequels. It's like one of the things they heavily criticized in that movie is that the relationship between Anakin and Padme from 1 minute goes to she's not really interested in him because he's so young to literally 5 minutes later she's in love with him on the beach of Naboo, and it's like, wait a minute, there was no growth there was no development. And it's the same thing with it was the same thing with a lot of movies like this in the 80s. It's like you were a little bit more concerned with getting to the special effects, what's going to happen when the moon turns full, and the whole whatever, he's going to tear people apart. You kind of skip over that bit of character development, and it's hard to attach yourself to her character, other than the fact that she's just the one who's going to have to say goodbye to him when he gets whacked at the end. You know what I mean? Well,
you can still see John Landis's Animal House effect. I mean, from the 8-year-old kid who walks up and slaps the nurse on the ass when he takes the comic book off the bed, which that makes me that's one of my favorite scenes. He just walks up. He's so casual about it, like he's done it 100 times. Then you've got her doing I've had 7 partners and 3 blah 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 whatever. You can tell this is 80s. This was an 80s film written by a man for a woman's dialogue. If I ever heard a woman come up to me and say, "Hey, Tex, I've been with 7 guys, 3 over the," I'm just going to walk away and assume you've got all the herpes. Like that's just where they live. Like
you don't have some of the STDs, you have them all.
You have all of them. I mean, if you have to give me a Carfax of your sex life, we're not doing this. That's sorry, honey, that ain't going to happen. But you can see, and I think that's, huh?
Well, I was going to say, these days, if a chick, who's roughly in her early 30s has only been with 7 guys, you got to think, okay, that's not bad.
Well, yeah, today's standards, they might make her a nut. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, she might be the next Mother Teresa if she's had sex with under 10 men. But hey, there's a lot of whores out there. What are you going to do? But you could see, and I think that's where the comedic side of this comes from, is the little punny stuff like that, and then when David Naughton is, like the when he goes up to the cop and he's trying to get arrested, and I wrote this down exactly because I wanted to get it right. And now keep in mind this is an '80s movie, so nobody freak the fuck out, everybody, you bunch of pussies. But Queen Elizabeth is a man. Prince Charles is a fag. Churchill's full of shit. Shakespeare is French. Shit, cunt, shit. It's just, and the way that he says it is just so funny. It's just like, this cop's basically like, okay, I don't want to do the paperwork for this. Just get out of here. Just go on. He's doing anything he can to not deal with it. But he knows what he is, and it's just, he knows he's a devilish monster, but he has to stop himself. You know what I mean? He's trying to do whatever he can. So, it's there. Yeah. You know what I mean?
But the cast, fantastic. I mean, I couldn't knock it at all. I'll have some more about that, some interesting tidbits about that in the trivia later on. But let's go to the basic plot. I mean, it's a werewolf movie. It's a very basic plot. Yeah, very.
Yeah,
the plot is basic, but again, I've said this a lot lately. There's a lot of movies that have similar plots, but like you consider one movie good, one movie not so good, one movie kind of average. It's usually in the way that you use that you tell the story. It's about the characters. It's about the way it's all in the presentation. Again, great presentation for what is essentially a plot that even in 1981 we had seen in movies for since the dawn of the film age. I mean, at least back in the 30s and 40s when monster movies became a thing. Right. Is there anything about the plot that you were disappointed in? I mean, I know that you and I are both big fans of this film, but is there anything about the plot that made you disappointed or left you a little wanting?
The one part of this that I was always disappointed in, and it's very basic, and I know why they pulled it out, but I really wanted the whole silver bullet thing to be part of the lore of this version of werewolf. I mean, it's with it goes with it so well. I mean, obviously they kind of meme it and make fun of it in this movie. Well, you just you've been watching too many movies or something. When Jack's dead, talking about it or whatever. But that's the one part of the plot that I would have changed. But other than that, I don't really have any complaints because there's just enough plot here to service the story, and that's the way that I think it should be. They don't try to overload it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, well, like I said, I mean, it's presentation. It's a very basic plot. You could have thrown this MacGuffin in there about a silver bullet, but then you end up taking up a lot of time trying to explain it. And one of the nice things about just not putting it in there at all is that you get to the more human side of the story. You get to concentrate on the characters, and you get to concentrate on the gore. Right. Because let's face it, really most of the third act, it's all about the visuals. It's all about the visuals.
Oh,
we'll talk about the transition, the transformation scene, and that scene at Piccadilly Circus, which is one of my favorite scenes ever, actiony kind of quick pace scenes ever in film. But I mean, you get to spend a lot more time kind of on what's really important, what should drive a movie like this, and that's the characters. You got to see a lot more about I really like the dialogue between the two characters, between David Naughton's character and David Dunne's character. Between Jack and David. I really like that dialogue, even considering that one of them was dead. It's just like that whole back and forth of like, him trying to tell David that he's a werewolf and he's to kill himself, or he's going to turn and he's going to do bad things. Like, that dialogue wasn't just funny. That was part of David's character growth. So, and I like the fact that they concentrated on that as opposed to working in some MacGuffin like a silver bullet.
And this is something I'll get into on the, if they remake this, but if they do remake this, those two characters and their relationship, I could make a really good, fun werewolf movie out of the psychological breakdown of what's going on there. I think there's a really good idea, but I think you're exactly right.
But the plot, again, kind of cookie cutter, but it doesn't really hurt. I mean, again, it's all in the presentation, because there's so many movies out there that have the same basic plot. It's all in the presentation. If you deliver it right, then you're going to have a hell of a movie. Now, I mean, let's talk about one of the things that has made this movie stand out over the years. That's the special effects. I hit the wrong one. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, Rick Baker, obviously this was Rick Baker is a god. He's a legend in Hollywood. He is just so damn good. This really was the movie that really put him on the map. I mean, do the special effects still hold up to you this many years later, or were they too dated and maybe kind of take you out of it a little bit?
Oh no, this is one of the standard bearers for creature effects in any movie. I've seen modern effects, and of course, we live in the days of CGI and bloated budgets to make Harrison Ford look 40 again. I get it. We're in a different time in life. But when you watch that scene where David is in the nurse's apartment, he's, I'm hot. I'm burning up. And then just the pain in the man's face and the way that he cuts, I love how he uses the furniture to kind of block what he doesn't want you to see as the effect is going on. The way it's laid out, it's genius. I mean, from the research that I've done, the majority of this film's budget was done in this scene right here, and it took forever to shoot because this is all practical. This isn't CGI. They're not putting this together in post. They're doing it in camera, and it's just this is one of the. I'll put this right up there with how Reagan is flipping up and down in the bed in The Exorcist because they actually did that. Literally broke Linda Blair's back doing it. I mean, this is the good stuff right here. This is when people say, "Oh, I prefer practical effects." This is what they're talking about. This movie right here. So it's incredible to see. And I mean, look at Jack right there. Whenever you see him in that hospital bed, this is just the first version. The flesh, like on that one side of his face, just barely covering the eye, and the neck is all ripped out. Oh my God, it looks amazing. I love it. I dig it.
Yeah. Practical effects. I mean, it's really unfortunate that practical effects has kind of taken a backseat to the CGI and the computer stuff, because for one specific reason I've always thought was really cool about the practical stuff, the real on-camera, on-set visuals, is that I feel like that helps to put, at least it would for me anyway, like it helps to put the actor in the mindset of the scene that they're supposed to be in. I mean, sometimes it's a necessity. Like when you're in Avengers and you're having a conversation with Thanos, you can't actually put somebody in a big purple suit up there, and so you have to have Josh Brolin standing there with the head thing, and you have to do some stuff like that. I get it, but whenever you can do, especially wounds, especially like the bloody stuff, if you can do that on camera, I think it makes it much more visceral, and I think that I would imagine for me that would help the performance. I mean, I understand that today's performers, they probably grew up on all the CGI and talk to the tennis ball and pretend like I have my guts hanging out of my ass or neck or whatever. I mean, you can do that, but it's like it's so much different to have it there in front of you as like a visual reminder as to what's happening in the scene. And on top of that, I see it looks better. I mean, the CGI stuff, it looks crisp, it looks clean, it looks shiny, but it doesn't look real.
But that's the problem. Sometimes it's too perfect, though. I mean, isn't that the reason people still collect, old records? Because music sounded, better with the, pops every now and then. It gave it a little bit of character. I like, and of course, I know I'm not the majority here. I'm the grindhouse drive-in kind of movie guy. I like when film doesn't have perfection to it. One of the things that I love about Rob Zombie's filmmaking is whenever he made House of a Thousand Corpses, after they shot it, he literally scratched the film up on purpose before they copied it, so it would have that old, gritty look like this film has. I appreciate the imperfections. It makes it feel that like it's not a polished piece of work. You know what I'm saying? It gives it character, I guess. It takes it to another level.
Yeah, but the special effects in this movie, I mean, it ushered in the 80s and early and real deep in the 90s, really up until the 2000s, a couple of decades of just amazing special effects. It's so much better. And we'll talk a little bit later in the trivia about how they had to tone down some of the special effects in order to give it an R rating, because there were people that were like, wait a minute, this is a bit too much. We need you to nip and tuck this movie a little bit to make this a bit more palatable. and some things that John Landis has kind of lamented over the years that he wished he could have left in there for various reasons. But let's talk the possibility of a remake. I mean, there's been whispers a lot over the last several years that there could be a potential remake of this. I mean, do you think it's a good idea right now, especially considering that the sequel that came out, which was not a direct sequel for the characters, but just kind of exists in the same universe, that do you think it would work now?
It wouldn't be anywhere near as impactful or successful as this film was. An American Werewolf in London is one of those. It's one of the top films of this genre. I think it's fair to say, and considering we live in such a time of remake, a lot of films get lost in the tread, and you don't even realize that they've happened, and then they're gone, and you see it on streaming somewhere 6 months later. I think you can do a remake, and I think the angle into this, obviously, keep it simple, stupid, make you a good werewolf movie. But the way you make it different is play up. Because, okay, in this film, when Jack dies or whenever the werewolf kills somebody, they hang around in limbo and the werewolf sees them or whatever. And it's never even suggested that it's not real. It's just given they hang out till the werewolf dies. Well, I think the best way to look at this is kind of like what they did for Michael Myers in 2007. Take the same story, but flip it on its head. Go it from a different angle. You could add another layer of subtext to this film, which they kind of did in this, but not nearly the way I would do it. Is if David, he gets bit by the werewolf, and then he thinks he sees these people. He's saying to the nurse, "Oh, Jack's right over there. I just talked to him." But she doesn't play him up as, "Oh, you're a hero. Let me fuck you at my house." She treats him like a crazy person, and he still does all the things that he does. There's room for a remake here, and it could be successful. But considering the climate of how many we've already had, I'd willing to bet it goes nowhere. You know what I mean? It may not even get a theatrical release. I mean, I don't know. This is a big movie for scary fans, but this isn't a film that's celebrated by the populace, I don't think. You know what I mean?
Well, nowadays it's probably not celebrated by the populace. Like I said, the hardcore cinema fans, especially the hardcore horror fans, like you and Jeremy, this is one of the movies that has kind of a special place. For me, obviously, it's one of the movies I grew up watching, regardless of the genre. But look, I hold the same opinion about remakes as I always have. Every movie is open for a remake, and if it's great, then fantastic. We have another great movie to enjoy. If it sucks, we always have the original to enjoy. So I say go ahead and give it a shot, but at the same time, I hope they take the same approach that John Landis did, rather than running for the big name actors, which is something they wanted him to do, rather than trying to make it a grand spectacle. Make it like a B-rate horror movie. And like I've always said about horror movies, the genre itself lends it to low budget. So keep the budget down, try to do as much practical stuff as possible, concentrate on the story and the characters, and tell the story through that, instead of trying to make it this grand spectacle with a lot of style but no substance. I feel like that sometimes people reach for that style, and they tend to cheat a little bit on the great character work or what actually makes the movie good, the dialogue and stuff like that. And if they don't do that, if they concentrate on what Landis did with this film and try to do a similar thing, I think it could work. I also say don't go after big actors. Find some new guys. Find some kids that are in their early 20s. Toy around a little bit, set it kind of more in the modern world, and I'm okay with that. But because as long as you make the approach that John Landis did back in 1981, I think it could be a serviceable remake. But as far as the potential of a remake is concerned, I mean, and this is coming from Wikipedia, so take it as you will. In June 2009, it was announced that Dimension Films was working with producers Sean and Brian First on a remake of the film. This has since been delayed due to other commitments. In August 2016, several reports suggested that Max Landis, the son of director John Landis, was considering remaking the film. In November of 2016, Deadline reported that Max Landis would write and direct a remake. In December of 2017, about a year later, Max Landis confirmed on Twitter that he had completed a first draft of the script, but beginning in late 2017, accusations by a number of women that Landis had abused them emotionally or sexually began to emerge in the public. Don't know if that's true or not. In the wake of those allegations, it remains unknown if Landis will be replaced or if the project will be put on definite hold. That was back in 2017. In 2019, Variety reported that Robert Kirkman, creator of the Walking Dead comic book series, was in consideration to serve as a producer for a new reboot of An American Werewolf in London. So there's still the possibility
I'd be all right with that.
Yeah, there's still a possibility that Kirkman could push this thing forward. That's an interesting name. He's connected to The Walking Dead, so the kind of special effects and makeup needed would it's something in his wheelhouse, something I'm sure that he would do. But that's the last that I've heard of it is stuff like that. I don't know. Like I said, I think
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I think a remake could work, but again, it's all about the formula. I mean, I don't want to don't put the Rock in it. Don't put Robert Pattinson in it. Don't go for these big Hollywood names. Get a couple of young kids and really concentrate on the character and the story and make the horror solid. I would honestly say that don't even make it a horror comedy. Make it a straight up horror. I mean, just go straight up.
I would.
I think that'd be a better thing to do.
Well, when you make a comedy film, I mean, comedy is the most subjective thing in entertainment. I mean, what someone finds hilarious, everybody else may just, not get or just think it's stupid or whatever. If you want a horror comedy of this film, just watch this film. If you're going to, I get your point of anything's up for a remake. To me, there's a list of certain films that I would put on a do not remake list. But, I don't know. Like I said, there's ways to do it, but I might wait a few years till this whole remake trend hopefully dies out. And then I think it would be better than just flopping it out there right now. You know what I'm saying? Give it a little bit of time to cool off. I think I would wait.
Yeah, I don't think the remake trend is ever going to go away. I mean,
I don't either, but it's just
I think
we've had so many bad ones here lately, though. You know what I mean?
It's going to ebb and flow like so many things do. I mean, like for a long time there was a lot of volcano movies coming out, and then for a long time there was a lot of shark movies coming out, and then for a long time there was a lot of this movie, and we had a spurt for a while in the around 2010 where westerns were starting to gain a little bit of popularity again. So you saw a couple of westerns come out. I mean, remakes are never going to go away. I just say do them right. It's now like
when was the last good werewolf movie?
Shit.
Trying to think.
The werewolf genre has become the monster genre has kind of taken a hit because remember, Universal was going to do the whole thing. They were going to rebuild their monster universe, and then the Tom Cruise Mummy came out, and they had Tom Cruise and Johnny Depp and all these other people that were going to be in this monster universe. They had to take that big picture on the set, and they're like, "Monster Universe, here it is, it's going to be so great." And then the Mummy with Tom Cruise comes out and it bombs, and they're like, never mind. And I'm like,
technically, Dracula Untold was the start of all that. But I don't think the guy that played Dracula was in that photo. I don't, for whatever reason, I don't think he was there. But yeah, that Tom Cruise Mummy movie, just the whole airplane scene, and somehow Tom Cruise doesn't die. I'm like, okay, this movie's garbage, and the Mummy sucked. It was a horrible film. I mean, hell, how many times have we said it on here before? We love the monster movies and we want that universe back, but I don't think it's ever going to happen. I think that time has passed, unfortunately.
Well, like I said, the problem is creativity. I don't mind that they go back to old movies and remake them. I don't mind that they go back to 30-year-old movies and make a sequel. I mean, Top Gun Maverick was fucking amazing. I mean, and this is another hill that I'll die on when it comes to movies. I think that's up there with Aliens and Terminator 2. I think that's that good of a sequel. Now, I don't know if it's quite as good as those other two. I mean, Terminator 2 is kind of my tops and really, really close as Aliens. But I mean, I would put Maverick up with those movies, Top Gun Maverick with those movies. But at the same time, the biggest problem is you have to create a good story. You have to create good characters. And if you do that, you will get Top Gun Maverick. You will get Aliens. You will get Terminator 2. There were so many other characters in that movie. If you just remake it for the sake of remaking it because you're trying to make money on the name, that's usually where it goes wrong. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, how many times have they remade Terminator and created a new timeline where John Connor may or may not exist? Sometimes he's the bad guy, and it's just blah. You know, I mean, it didn't work. But I would see a remake of this. I'd be down for it. I would want. I think if I were going to remake it, I would set it in a different time period, though. Maybe place it back in time a little bit further. Maybe it happens in the 30s, so you can kind of tie to that universal time period even more. You know, have it take place in the 30s and the 40s to give it. You know, I mean, I think most people like, you know, a time period movie, which you could make it. But, you know, there's some interesting ways you could make this film. You know what I mean? I don't know. There's a lot you could do with it. There's a lot of ideas.
The other thing about a remake is I mean, it really does come down to creative minds. It comes down to a great director who's got a great vision and the writers to write a great story, which is one of the reasons why I kind of come down on the side of the writers in this whole strike, because that's kind of where, I mean, yeah, Tom Cruise can go out there and read the lines and somebody's got to write them. And I don't think Tom Cruise is a writer, last I checked. So unless Xenu's writing stuff for him over on Gold Base over there,
actually,
in California somewhere. But I mean, if you think about it, because one of the things that gets brought up a lot in the remake conversation is Jaws. Classic movie.
Oh, it makes my skin crawl.
A lot of people say it's the top 10 movie of all time, but it's one of the movies that gets brought up. And I'm like, you know, I need details before I start to get too worried about it. Now, think about who made Jaws. We had a young, visionary Steven Spielberg that made Jaws. There are other names out there that if you had said that Steven Spielberg is in pre-production on a remake of Jaws, he's going to write it and direct it himself, I would say, okay, I'm listening. I'm a little more open to that, because it's the movie anyway. It's from a book, of course, but the movie, the first film that came out in the 70s, was his baby. It's a labor of love for him. He's going to treat it in a way that, like some other asshole who's just trying to make a name for himself, is going to come in there and I'm just going to make this my own. It's going to be bigger, and he would make it the Meg, essentially. So if what that news comes out, I'd say, okay, this is a guy who's connected to this from the very beginning, so I'm interested in what comes next. But if it's not him, but if you throw in a name like a Ron Howard or somebody like that, it's like, again, it's somebody who respects the original film, someone who himself has a great track record of making amazing films. I would listen to that. Now, if you just said McGee is going to direct this, I'd be like, stop right now, Nuke Hollywood, make sure this movie never fucking happens, because the guy's made. Because while I think the Charlie's Angels movies he made were wildly entertaining, they weren't good films by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, hang on a minute. Did I know Spielberg didn't? Okay, did he direct any of the Jaws sequels, or was he just executive producing? I can't remember.
I think he was probably just an executive producer. He's not known for going back, and he's not, because
I don't think he directed Jaws 2, 3, or God knows. God help him if he directed Jaws 4. That thing is bad.
Yeah, he's not.
Well, I take that back. Jaws 2 is not a bad movie if you actually give it a chance. I watched it not too long ago.
Jaws 2 was directed by Janut Zwarok. I hope I pronounced that right. Let's see. Starring Snyder, Gary Hamilton, and Jeffrey Kramer reprising their roles. It is generally regarded as the best of the sequels. Jaws 3D came out in '83 and does not feature any of the original actors, although it was directed by Joe Alves, who had served as the art director and production designer on the two preceding films. That starred Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr., released in negative reviews in the 3D format. Let's see where it was renamed Jaws 3. Jaws the Revenge was directed by Joseph Sargent and featured the return of Lauren Gray as Ellen Brody, co-starred Michael Caine, considered one of the worst movies ever made. That was not a good movie. Well, all three sequels made a profit at the box office. Jaws 2 and Jaws 3D were among the top 20 highest grossing films of their years. Critics and audiences were largely dissatisfied. So no, he didn't come back to direct any of them.
Well, see, with this movie, American Werewolf in London, I kind of feel the same about it that I do with Jaws or I do Exorcist. These movies are tremendous. They're a they're a piece of their time period. We've seen sequels to all of these movies. How many shark movies have we seen, from the Megs to the Sharknadoes to the Shark versus Zilla, Attack of the Three-Headed Shark? We've done these movies to death. Possession movies for The Exorcist. There's been 1,000 different knockoffs of The Exorcist ever since that film came out. The werewolves haven't been done as much, but with this movie, I would worry that it's as you said in your breakdown in the beginning. It fits it within it's aged, but it's aged well. It's aged beautifully, I would even say. And for it to be redone, it needs to. For me, like if I were given the keys to this vehicle and say, "Go make us a good movie," I would go complete different time period, just so I wouldn't be compared. Because anytime you redo a story like this, you're going to get hauled on the carpet for it. And I think you better be a damn good film director. And it's like Gamer had said in the comment section. I don't know when he said it, but I just saw it in the chat. This better not be a CGI creature. You better go practical. You better go puppet. You better do whatever. But do not go CGI. You will piss a lot of people off. You know what I mean?
Well, I would say for like as many of the close-up shots as possible, it would definitely need to be practical. You would need something real life right there to see on camera. Now there might be some shots, like some of the quick cuts of attacks and whatnot. I mean, you could deal with those in CGI. That's one thing. But if you're going to have a moment because there's a couple of scenes in this film where he's kind of stalking, and I kind of like the idea of seeing, like when he's stalking the guy in the subway in this film. I kind of like.
I love that shot. I love that shot from the escalator. It's my favorite.
Yeah, I do like the idea of seeing from the wolf's perspective. So as you're looking down camera, as this guy is kind of running away and you're kind of following him through. Yeah. I do like that. But I want to see, if there were to be a remake, I would want to see more scenes of him stalking his prey rather than just jumping out of a dark corner somewhere where nobody sees him, tearing people up and running away. I would want to see one of those scenes that builds tension, so that way when he does make that attack, there is that release of endorphins, like, holy shit, this was the moment that we were building for the last couple of minutes. You kind of get that effect. I want to see more of that. You know what I mean?
Well, I get it completely. My favorite shot, besides the transformation, that's the easy answer. My favorite shot in this movie is at the end of that subway chase, whenever that dude is completely exhausted and he's laying on the escalator and it's going up, and we're on the top floor up here looking down, and we see him laying on the escalator, and we see the wolf just walk up to it, and then it cuts right there because you know what's about to happen. Now, would I love to see that kill? Oh yes. But to me, that is the most gorgeous shot in this entire movie. It looks so well. Oh, it's incredible. Every time I watch this movie, I pause on it because you could make that, like, I always say, what scenes from this film could you make a poster? And that's one you could see. It's like that scene in the film The Strangers, when Liv Tyler's standing there and the kitchen lights off in the background, except for the one on the side, and that one bagged head comes out from behind her in the shadows. There's no sound, there's no anything, but that one shot is such a picturesque moment. It just takes your breath away. That shot on the escalators in this movie is that same for me. I love it.
Yeah, I agree. That was a great shot. Something that wouldn't have been the same with a CGI wolf. If you had CGI'd a wolf kind of walking out of that tunnel, I think it would be much better to, in real life, see the shadow, see the matted fur, to see him kind of like walking out of the thing and then looking up, almost like looking up at his prey, but almost feeling like that angle he's looking at the camera, at the viewer. I think that'd be a killer shot. But yeah, if you're gonna remake this, you got to make sure you stay in your lane. That would be the important thing for me. That's one of the things that I would concentrate on if I were making the film. But let's move on to a little bit of trivia now. Boy, when I was looking up trivia for this, there was 400 100 pieces that I could have gone with.
Really?
I tried to boil it down to some of the more interesting ones. I found 15 of them, but honestly, go check out the. I'm kind of glad I did now because Jeremy had to bail out at the last second because he's got a thing going on. But so I'm kind of glad we're gonna have more to talk about. But at the same time, it's like there were some pieces of trivia on the IMDb page that I found very interesting. Now, not everything I could bring up here, of course, but I mean there were some that was pretty interesting. See, the first one is about Landis and kind of his creativity behind the whole thing. Landis actually wrote the first draft of the screenplay for this film back in 1969 and shelved it for over a decade.
Wow.
Prospective financiers believed that Landis' script was too frightening to be a comedy film and too humorous to be a horror film. After achieving success in Hollywood with comedies like Kentucky Fried Movie and National Lampoon's Animal House and The Blues Brothers, Landis was able to secure financing from Polygram Pictures to produce an American Werewolf in London the way that he wanted to make it. Good thing he did.
I didn't realize it set for that long. I didn't realize that. Hell, I wasn't around in '69, but this is a. Let's see. Okay, he shelved this in '69. So Night of the Living Dead and Psycho had just came out about that same time period. The horror boom of the '70s hadn't hit yet. So at that point in time, scary movies were basically pornography. So I could see it would be hard to get financing for. You know what I mean? I'm trying to think what other horror was out in the '60s that. Let's see, we hadn't had Rosemary's Baby yet.
Well, you got to think back then, horror was considered most of horror was suspense horror. There wasn't a whole lot of murder stuff like what we would eventually get like Friday the 13th and stuff like that with Jason machetes and all that. A lot of it was really suspense horror. It's like Night of the Living Dead. It's basically the zombies walking around. Rosemary's Baby. It's essentially about a ghost or a spirit. There's not a lot of the visuals. The visual horror, the slasher films didn't become a thing until into the 80s. Maybe late 70s when we get stuff like Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
The monster movies kind of died in the 50s whenever the sci-fi Attack of the 50-foot whatever came into play as well. So I could see how it would be hard to get a wolf picture made whenever that had left Hollywood 20 years before. Yeah, it makes sense. It sucks though. That's interesting.
All I know is I'm glad he got the financing. I'm actually very happy with it.
100%. Yeah.
But also back to John Landis and kind of the journey to get this film made. John Landis actually came up with a story while he worked in Yugoslavia as a production assistant on the film Kelly's Heroes. Back in 1970 is when he kind of fine-tuned a little bit of the story. He and a Yugoslav member of the crew were driving in the back of a car on location when they came across a group of Romani people. The Romani people appeared to be performing rituals on a man being buried so that he would not rise from the grave. This made Landis realize he would never be able to confront the undead and gave him the idea for the film in which a man would go through the same thing. So he used that idea to kind of hone the script even more.
That would make sense with, how the people in that village, when in that one pub there have like the pentagram on the wall with the candles and stuff going. I can see how you made that fit into this. That makes a lot of sense.
Let's see. Also, I talked a little bit ago about how important it is to cast the right people in these roles so that the chemistry is right. Actually, Universal Studio executives were pressuring John Landis, the director, to cast Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi as David Kessler and and Jack Goodman. But Landis went with unknown actors instead. Boy, best decision he could have made. I mean, because this movie would have gone full-on comedy at that point.
Yeah, they would have. Now, if you want to make the Saturday Night Live version of this movie, you cast Aykroyd and them. But no, this was perfect casting. I can't think of any other actor from that time period that I would have rather had than these guys. I thought they nailed it.
Yeah. To me, the problem is this movie would have gone full-blown comedy. Now, I'm not saying a werewolf comedy starring these two guys would have been good, but you wouldn't have had some of the beats that this movie had if you'd have cast those guys. But one of the things I find interesting about the potential casting of Dan Aykroyd, though, was this is right up his alley. This is the kind of thing that I really think he would have enjoyed, because you know what he's into, right?
Oh yeah, no, he's Aykroyd is into the paranormal. I've watched a lot of his stuff. He's
his grandfather actually literally wrote the book on paranormal investigating.
Yeah. Well, that's why all of that stuff from Ghostbusters is legit, because he knows his shit.
Oh yeah. If you get a chance, I don't know if you guys have listened to him or not. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast a couple of years ago, and I was listening to it thinking that they were going to talk about some of this shit, and that they were going to talk about, the movies and stuff like that. They spent most of the 2 or 3 hours talking about the occultist stuff and ghosts and UFOs and all this shit. And that's when I found out that his father or grandfather, I forget, his father or grandfather actually literally wrote a book back in the early 1900s about paranormal investigations and shit like that. And he actually wrote, him being Dan Aykroyd actually wrote the foreword for a republishing of that book in the, I want to say, early 2000s. So yeah, I mean that's right up his alley.
I'm not sure about
one thing. That's the one thing about Dan Aykroyd that really interested me about the potential for him being in the movie. Is this is the kind of shit that he really would have gotten into. It really could have been a lot of fun.
There was one of those. I think it's called Paranormal Survivor, or it's one of those ghost hunter type TV shows where a person who was haunted sits in front of a camera and tells their story, and they reenact it, with actors or whatever. He narrated a show. It's been on syndication. It may be 10 years old. I don't know. But Aykroyd, he's big into that supernatural stuff. I'm into a lot of that as well. He's got a lot of. He's mainly more aliens from what I can see here lately. But yeah, from the ghosts to the everything else, Aykroyd's legit. He knows his stuff, man. He wrote all that stuff in the Ghostbusters. He didn't just make it up. He knows his shit. You know what I mean?
Let's see. Also, the American Werewolf in London was the first film allowed to shoot in Piccadilly Circus in London in 15 years. Landis accomplished this by inviting 300 members of London's Metropolitan Police Service to a screening of his new film, The Blues Brothers. The police were so impressed by his work that they granted the production a 2-night filming permit between the hours of 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. And traffic was stopped only 3 times for 2-minute increments to film the automobile stunts involving the double-decker bus. Do you want to know how crazy that sounds? That entire sequence in Piccadilly Circus is so chaotic. They shot that essentially in 6 months.
Oh, yeah. Dude, it looks like a crash at Daytona or something. You've got cars and people were getting pinned in between them. And at the end of this film, it's insane. So for them to get basically 6 hours to film if they were to film that these days, that would at least be a 2-week shoot, with multiple takes and everything else. There's no way they could do it.
And it's by far the fastest pace of the entire film. Like, once all hell breaks loose, he turns into a wolf for the second time. He's tearing people up in Piccadilly Circus. And it's like, and everything that went into that. It's like there were so many people getting thrown through windshields and run over by cars and thrown out of cars and smashed and decapitated. There's so much that happens in like that 3 minutes of film that it's hard to imagine that they shot all of that in essentially 9 hours. No,
this is very much
6 hours.
This is very much a slow burn film. I mean, yeah, it starts off, you have your, Jack gets killed, David gets turned, but this is that traditional slow burn 70s, 80s style film. But once it gets to the where he turns the very first time and, you get your subway kill and whatever, it amps up after that. And then once you get to that car crash scene at the end, they give it to you with both barrels. They've put you through the ringer. You care about the characters, and now they're going to kill them all. I love it. It's the way a good horror movie should. That's why I appreciate Eli Roth so much, because he doesn't mind killing anybody. That's one good thing about a horror film. Nobody's safe. Kill everybody. So it's all good. Uh-oh. Frank freeze? Uh-oh.
There's another picture.
I guess Frank froze on it.
Find it kind of quickly. But
there
I'm
you
here.
Did
my shit trip out for a minute? Okay. No, I'm doing a couple different things. I'm trying to so I can kind of squirrely again. Yeah. But no, I was just saying there's another piece of trivia I was trying to dig up that has something to do with the next one I was going to read. But I'll move on to this one instead. David Naughton was reportedly cast because John Landis had seen him in a television commercial for Dr. Pepper. However, Naughton was later let go by Dr. Pepper as a spokesperson because of the nude scenes in this film. I read something, I didn't put it in the trivia.
Really?
David Naughton actually spends 40% of his screen time naked.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't see him naked in the sex scene. Well, I mean, you see his butt, but you don't see his dick or nothing. But you do see his dick whenever he transforms back to human or whatever.
Well, as I was watching the movie last night, I was, especially in the scene where he's having that dream sequence where he's running through the woods. There were a couple of spots where I was just like, I bet you if I were a woman, I'd be hitting pause right about now to see if I can to see what I can see.
There's a dick. There's another dick.
There's a couple of scenes in there where it's like, I bet you if you pause just right, if you're a woman and you want that kind of view, you're gonna be getting that view if you pause it just right. But
well, that's what's so funny. The nurse that plays in this movie, she's been naked in other films. I forget what it is. I've seen it. I mean, she goes full frontal. She gives it all to you, buddy. But you don't get to see it in this movie. You would have thought they would have shown that, but I guess for whatever reason she didn't want to. So, interesting. It's very odd.
They actually
full male frontal and not female. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is kind of weird. I don't know if I don't think I put that particular thing in here, but there was some stuff about the editing that he had to do for this. I'll find it in a second. But let's see. The film's ironically upbeat soundtrack consists of songs which refer to the moon, obviously enough. And Brooding Gamer was just talking about this a little bit ago. Down a year ago's host talked about how the music was so good. But let's see. A soothing, Bobby Vinton's slow, soothing version of Blue Moon plays during the opening credits.
Blue Moon,
Van Morrison's Moon Dance plays as David and Alex make love for the first time. Then you have Creedence Clearwater's Revival's Bad Moon Rising. Love Creedence.
Oh, I love me some CCR, man. I love CCR.
Yeah, that plays as David nears the moment of changing into the werewolf. And then a soft, bittersweet ballad version of Blue Moon by Sam Cooke plays during the agonizing wolf transformation. And the Marcel's doo-wop version of Blue Moon plays over the end credits.
I'll tell you what.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I miss when I'll take it back. I really appreciate when modern films invest in the soundtrack because it seems like they kind of stopped doing that in the late 90s, early 2000s. Now, like Suicide Squad in 2016 had a really good soundtrack. Stranger Things, they always pay attention to the music. But a lot of modern film doesn't really care about a soundtrack anymore. It's missed out.
And there have been some bangers. It's like I still think and Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, their soundtracks for all three of the Guardians films have been good. But yeah, I mean, films don't focus on that as a selling point anymore. I don't know why. I don't know if that film marketing kind of evolved away from that, or if they just didn't want to do it anymore. It just kind of fell out of vogue.
Right.
But I mean, I've said many, many times. I mean, me and Jeremy and Cora did a whole video about this a while back on movie soundtracks. I mean, if you go look at soundtracks for movies like Fast Times at Ridgemont High, I mean, they're great albums from start to finish of great songs of that time period. I don't know why they've gotten away from that. Now they occasionally will have like a theme song for different stuff. I mean, we talked Pearl Harbor a while back, and Faith Hill did the love theme for that. But I mean, there is no real soundtrack that comes out for a movie anymore. I think a lot of it is because they don't want to pay artists for rights to put like if there's an REM song or a U2 song or whatever that you think goes good with the moment in the movie, you pay one amount for it to be used in the film, but you pay a whole different amount to actually release it on like an album, to where you're going to sell an album for money. It becomes a whole different ball. It becomes a whole different ballgame at that point. So maybe it's just a financial thing. As to people were like, yeah, we don't want to spend money on making these anymore. We'll have the one or two songs on the official soundtrack or the whatever, but they don't want to do them like they used to. That's disappointing. But another song that John Landis fought hard to secure the rights to was the Cat Stevens song Moonshadow. He really wanted that to be used in the film because the film dealt with the supernatural, the undead, and werewolves, and also because of the graphic, at the time, 1981 violence. Cat Stevens, who had since converted to Islam, had his name changed to Yusuf Islam, had refused Landis's request. Yusuf objected to the themes and subject matter and did not want his song connected in any way to the film. Landis thought this was hilarious because, as he points out, Moonshadow is actually about killing and dismemberment. Landis thought this song was perfect for the movie, but Stevens had other ideas. It is kind of weird, yeah. But whatever.
I think the one song that would have been perfect here would have been Frank Sinatra's It's Witchcraft. I think that would have been amazing within this film somewhere. I think that really could have worked. Like, I kept thinking that because I watched it twice for this review recently just because I wanted to. Well, I watched it the first time for review purposes and then the second time because it's a really good fucking movie. But, it's, I thought, if you had, a little It's Witchcraft playing in there somewhere in a pub or something, it would have fit well. But yeah, I dig it. It's cool, man.
Yeah, Griffin Dunne, who played the friend in the movie, stated in a 2007 interview that his biggest fear was that his mother, who was ill at the time, would not be able to handle seeing a film where her son appeared as a mutilated corpse. When she finally saw it, she was deeply disturbed by it. I feel kind of bad. Right. I'm sure he probably warned her. He was like, "Hey, Mom, just so you know, you're going to see me tore up in this film. I die in this film."
Well,
but
I guess it couldn't be any worse than. Well, I mean, could you imagine me and David Naughton and having to take your mom to this movie and she's seeing you naked on a 70-foot screen? I mean, it can be worse here, people. So, Mom, cover your eyes. My dick's about to flop out as I climb this wall. Whatever. So,
like I said, he spent something like 40% of this movie naked. Now it's just like, okay, good on you, buddy. Hey, it's a good movie, nonetheless. Nudity sells. David Naughton's nudity sells. We've already talked endlessly about Rick Baker and how good he is. Rick Baker actually plays one of the werewolves in the nightmare sequence, specifically the one who slashes David's throat in the dream sequence.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He was one of the zombies in the Thriller video too, as I recall.
I think so. They made a couple years ago
movies. Look.
A couple years ago, the toy company NECA had came out because NECA makes all the horror figures, like the real detailed ones or whatever. They did the American Werewolf in London line. They did the main werewolf, of course, and then they did a couple versions of the Nazi wolf. One version that had the helmet on the head, one with the longer hair or whatever. And they sold really well. Like, somehow they, the movie was so good, they were able to sell Nazi toys at Walmart. That's how good his designs were. So that tells you anything. That got through the century. But yeah, it's Rick Baker's a legend, man.
Yeah, he talks a little bit in that Joe Rogan interview about why he chose to retire. It's kind of sad if you think about it, but I mean, the guy's smart enough to see the writing on the wall. He said, I was looking around and I was seeing all the stuff that we used to do practically being done by computers now. And he was like, well, I'm not going to change what I'm doing, how I do things. And obviously the way I do it is kind of going the way of the dodo. So I'm going to go ahead and get out now. And it's disappointing because it's like, to hear him talk, it's like the guy's still got great ideas. His brain is still working better than mine. That's for damn sure. There's still so much this guy I think could contribute to the film industry. But he's just looking at it. He's like, I'm the dinosaur in this now. And he's only like 60 or something like that. I mean, he's probably closer to 70, but but he's not an old. He's not a young man. Neither is he an old one. And I really think that guy could teach a lot of people into the special effects world in Hollywood and really kind of continue his legacy on way past his own life. But it's kind of sad that he kind of sees the writing on the wall and he's like, oh well, I guess I'm just fucking done here.
Well, I think today, when practical effects are so missed, he could make not like a full-time resurgence, but kind of do what John Carpenter does when a new Halloween film is made. He comes back for, name recognition and he contributes a little bit, but he doesn't really carry the workload or whatever, right? I could see him doing something like that, you know what I mean? I don't think that'd be much of an issue.
Yeah, I would love to see him teach the next generation. I mean, just have him as a consultant, showing these younger generation of special effects.
I know he retired, but did he just completely go away, or did he do something like that? Because I know,
not 100% sure.
Because I know Tom Savini, he doesn't do much creature or work or mask work or anything anymore, but he does a lot of appearances and talks and everything else. Now Greg Nicotero, he's like the main zombie guy for Walking Dead. So he's very busy. But I know Savini, I think he's just writing books and doing appearances these days, but I'm not for sure.
Let's see. Born. So Rick Baker is 72 years old. He was born December of 1950. So he's 72.
Oh, yeah. No, he's probably retired. Yeah, he's probably.
He looks great.
I mean, I don't know how much money he's made over the years, but I'm sure he made more than plenty. So, I mean, he's probably sitting back enjoying his royalty checks and whatever. So, I mean, hell, just from the Michael Jackson stuff, he probably made a fortune, I would guess. But I don't know. But no, I could see, like I said, I could see him doing some kind of return in a minor role. I mean, hell, John Carpenter, I think he's older than 72, if I'm right.
So I guess he's kind of semi-retired. It says he retired officially, announced it officially in May of 2015.
Right.
Let's see. He said, what did he say? I'm 64. The business is crazy right now. They want it cheap and fast. It's not what I do, so I decided it's basically time to get out. I would consider designing and consulting on something.
The man knows his worth. I have to give him that.
But I don't think I will have a huge working studio anymore. In 2018, Baker was approached by DC Comics due to his daughter Veronica working for them at the time, if he would be interested in creating a collectible display of busts for them. He agreed with the following terms: that he would be left alone with total creative freedom, and DC accepted. Baker, with the aid of his longtime mold maker Rob Freitas, created a bust of the Joker. I'll have to try to find a picture of that. I don't think I'll be able to find it now. But I was
going to say a Rick Baker Joker. That's something I can get behind here.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that'd be a whole lot of fun.
I'm surprised I never heard about that. I'm plugged into horror and DC, and somehow that did not hit my radar. I'm a little bit ashamed of myself. I'm going to be honest with you.
I would imagine that even if he made several of them, I would imagine that they were probably well outside of our price range.
Oh well,
they were probably
not necessarily
on the cheap end. They were several $1,000s a piece.
DC makes it, well, not just DC, but Marvel as well. They make a lot of statue collectibles, anywhere from the hundreds of dollars to the thousands. I mean, you can buy one for $120 or $1,200. You know what I mean? So that may have been something that they mass marketed too. I don't know. I just never heard about it. That's interesting. I'm going to go. I'm going to Google that when I get off here. I want to see these. I'm sure there's images out there.
Let's see, what do we got next? Michael Jackson, of course, was so bowled over by this movie, most especially by the makeup and visual effects, that he insisted on hiring the responsible personnel for his planned music video, Michael Jackson's Thriller, in 1983. When John Landis agreed to direct, that was his first music video. He brought on board his foremost werewolf crew, including Robert Painter, who as the cinematographer, Elmer Bernstein, who did basically the music and stuff, Rick Baker for his makeup effects, and his wife, Deborah Noodleman, who did the costume design. Noodleman, who did all the costume design. So yeah, I mean, so basically most of the crew that was responsible for all the visual effects of this movie ended up doing Michael Jackson's Thriller. But again, best piece of video ever made, ever, hands down. Bring me one video that even comes close. Nothing in the last 20 years, at least.
Well, if you want to talk like movie-wise, like presentation, yeah, it's probably Thriller because it looks like a 3-minute, scary movie. I mean, it doesn't compare production-wise on any level, but I would put a lot of the ZZ Top videos, like, Legs, Sharp Dressed Man, how all of those videos connected to one another. I would put them up there with that same vein. But, I mean, hell, the Cherry Pie video, I mean, there's a lot of, that's a whole different conversation. But production-wise, yeah, Thriller, like I said, it looks like a monster movie. You can't compete with that. I don't know.
Let's see. We talked a little bit about the regrets that Landis had and some of the edits he had to make. In order to get the movie down to an R rating, Landis had to tone down the sex scene and cut out a part where a piece of toast fell out of Jack's undead throat. Remember the scene in the hospital when he first shows up? He says he wants a piece of toast.
He dips the toast in the egg.
Yeah. He also edited out a scene where the werewolf kills the 3 homeless men after preview audiences freaked out. Landis later said he had regrets about the edits. I mean, I don't know. Director's cuts have been a thing for a long time. He could have put out a director's cut.
They cut that. They cut those 3 kills. They cut the guy on the escalator getting killed. You just see the aftermath. You can tell this was trimmed down pretty massively. I could see that.
The couple that he attacks as they go around the building to try to surprise their friends.
Yeah,
you don't see any of that. You see like the body parts that the guy steps in, but you don't see the actual attack. You hear it more than anything else. So I mean, I don't know if that was something he did on purpose or if that was another edit that he may have made to try to satisfy the ratings board.
I mean, I have a hard rule of show don't tell when it comes to kills in any kind of movie, but especially a scary movie. But for some reason, I kind of forgive more than I do for this film than I don't for others. I mean, does that make any sense? This movie's so good, even not showing you as much of the gory stuff, I forgive it. Which maybe I'm biased. I don't know, and I don't really care. But they could have shown us more. But it's not the director's fault. He wanted to do more.
I don't mind an off-screen death kind of early in the film. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because that
can
be done
multiple
as a tension builder.
You know what I mean?
That can be done as a tension builder. Yeah, that can be done as a tension builder.
Right.
But it gets to a point, especially in a movie like this or like any kind of run-of-the-mill slasher film, where I need to see that knife plunge into somebody's body. I need to see blood and guts. And so it gets to a point where I have to see that. You know what I mean?
Well, that's like in Halloween Ends, in the scene where they're in the car lot, where they're all the torn apart cars, and fake Michael has that guy on the ground, and he puts the road flare in his mouth, and like the camera zooms in, and it just goes right past, and all you see is the shadow of that dude's head being burned out from the inside or whatever. I'm like, why did you take that kill away from him? Or, I mean, there's so many movies that do that, and it bugs me. This, like I said, this movie does it at least 4 times that I can think of with the guy on the escalator. Well, I guess technically 6. The couple, the guy on the escalator, and then the 3 hobos. So there's 6 kills right there that we could have gotten more gore on, but, the MPAA decided to rate this movie. So, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah. Let's see. We already talked a little bit about the zoo scene and how kind of comical that is to watch. David Naughton. I highlighted the wrong thing here. Oh, my computer's not working with me today. There we go. David Naughton recalled the zoo scene. He says, and I quote, "As for running naked around London Zoo and the scene where I'm in the wolf cage, the only reassurance I had was that the wolves had just been fed, but the handlers still said there was to be no loud noises or fast moves. Okay, I said, hopefully this will just be one take, so start rolling the cameras. He said, we were supposed to be done by 9 a.m., but we overran. And at one point, I looked up and said, wow, they have all these extras over there, to which somebody replied, they're not extras. The zoo is open. So he was running around an open zoo, butthole naked.
Could you imagine bringing your kids to the zoo and, hey, honey, let's take the boys, the kids over to see the wolves. Oh, there's a dick out. What's going on here?
There's a guy, yeah.
There's a naked man standing there, that you would have thought you would have had a closed set for, if not for anything but safety reasons. Hey,
Well, this was the 80s. It was the early 80s.
Right.
I mean, for one, now this was before people started to get really uptight about nudity on set and stuff. Because nowadays they very much practice what is called a closed set. You only have the actors necessary for the scene, the director, maybe a script person, and then like one or two, like a camera person, maybe one lighting person. That's it. Nobody else is allowed on set. Period. While you're shooting on a closed set, because they want to limit the exposure that the actors are getting.
I forget what movie it was, but it was one I watched recently. There was a sex scene where the girl had to get naked, right? So to make her feel comfortable, the director just stripped butt naked. He's like, well, if you have to be naked here, I'll be naked too. And then so he's sitting there in his chair butt naked while he's filming this girl doing her thing. Just as a comfortability kind of thing. It's like, well, that's some team effort right there. So, credit where it's due.
I guess. well, on that note, this next piece of trivia, the fake porno movie is called See You Next Wednesday. That's what they were watching in the theater towards the end of the film before he has his final transformation. That was actually the first thing to be filmed during production. So that porno movie was shot specifically to be included in this film. It was
not an
existing film.
What does that guy come in the room and say? I told you not to do this again, or something like that. I can't remember now.
He says, I forget what he says. He's like, why are you here? Something like that. She goes, I don't even know who you are. And then like hilariously enough, the guy goes, oh yeah, my mistake. He just turns around and walks out. And I'm like,
it's very odd.
These two people banging. And it's like you say something, and then you realize it's the wrong person. You're like, "Oh, sorry, my mistake." And you just kind of blasé turn around and walk away, close the door, and then they go right back to business. I'm like, that's almost as awkward as her being like, "I've had 7 lovers. 3 of them were one night stands." Like 5 minutes after you walk this guy into your bedroom, it's just an awkward moment.
I swear to God. If you have to ask somebody's sexual resume, you don't need to be sleeping with them. That should be a rule of thumb here. I don't know. It's so odd. It's funny, but it's weird.
It was really weird, but to stick with the porno theme, all of the people gathered around the porno theater at the end really thought that there was a wild animal inside the theater. John Landis didn't tell any of them that it was fake, because he wanted to get the right reaction out of everyone. So when the head busts through the pull down gate of the theater, some of the screams and the reactions were actually genuine. These people had no idea what the hell was going on.
Wow,
that's direct.
I like that. That's some found footage, real style going at it. I dig that approach. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that to me is one of the best decisions. If you get a chance to do that as a director, that's one of the best things you can do. Because, have you heard the story about when they dropped Alan Rickman out of the tower in Die Hard?
I think so.
The story when they obviously they didn't do it for real. Obviously, they didn't do it for real. It was all blue screen and stuff on a set, but I guess they wanted to make sure they got a legitimate reaction from Alan Rickman. So they had him up on this, and you could probably find him telling the story somewhere on the internet. I'm sure it's been in some interviews.
Oh, I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere.
But they have him up on this rigging, and he's laying back, and somebody says, "Okay, on the count of 3, we're going to go ahead and hit this button. You're going to drop down, and you're going to hit the balloon or the pad at the bottom, and we're going to get the shot." Right. So he's like, "Okay, ready? 1," and then they just hit the button. So when he expected a 3 count, they just hit the button. So that look of absolute shock that you see on his face as he starts to drop in slow motion was actually his real shock. He was not expecting to be dropped like that.
Wow.
he was kind of like preparing himself mentally in those final seconds, and then it just happened, and he was like, "Holy shit, here I am!" Because they did that because they wanted to get an actual look of shock out of him, and yeah, that's how you get great movie moments like this. You got to manipulate that moment. And it's happened.
That's no different than when a freaking blew off a shotgun on the opposite side of the wall where Reagan was. So whenever she cuts that head tilt real fast, he wanted a legitimate scared face on her when she turned her head around on the scene of The Exorcist. Yeah. I mean, this is just. I mean, hell, he flat out slapped Linda Blair in the face and basically gave her a dog cussing because he wanted like legitimate emotions out of her. I mean, this is different filmmaking from a different time. There's no way they'd be allowed to do this kind of stuff now, but things were better back then.
Yeah. That they were. See, I'm gonna go pull up a couple bonus pieces of trivia, but I gotta reload this page real quick. But I'll go to one. I'll go ahead and hit you with this one, Tex. Body count. What was the official body count of this movie? I normally only do this because I know it annoys the fuck out of Jeremy, but he wasn't able to make it today, so I'm gonna hit you with it. What do you think the body count was? Okay, go ahead.
I've watched the film twice. I've paused. I've counted. I think I have the correct number. I think it's 22. It's either 21 or 22. Okay.
You're very, very close. Here's what I totally understand why Jeremy gets frustrated when I use IMDb as a source for this. According to IMDb, one count says 20, but another count says 9. I'm going to go with like where you're guessing between 20 and 9 by another count. I don't know.
There's like 6 or 7 alone in that car chase thing.
I don't know. I don't know what they were counting. I don't know if they're counting people that. I don't know if they're counting just people who were killed by David Naughton's werewolf, or if they're counting total deaths in the movie. If you want to count just people who were killed by David Naughton, maybe 9's closer, but I still think 9's a little low.
Well, I've got the original wolf. You have Jack. You have the couple in the taxi, so there's 4. You have the 3 homeless guys. That's 7. The man in the train station is 8. The man in the porn theater is 9. The detective is 10. David himself would be 11. There's a whole bunch in that car chase scene. By the time I got done, it was either 21 or 22. But I may have counted wrong. I'm not for sure.
Yeah, I didn't bother counting it until I was putting some of these trivia facts together last night. This was after I'd seen the movie. I didn't really think about it. But, I mean, like I said, if you're going to count all the deaths, I would say 20, 22, right about where you were guessing is probably about right.
Right.
But if you're only counting the people that David kills over the course of the movie, 9 might be closer, but I still think 9 is a death or two low.
If you're only counting the ones that David killed, it's not going to be the original wolf, not Jack. So you count 2 for the couple in the theater, 3 for the homeless guys, so that's 5. The man in the train station, the man in the porn theater, so 7.
And there's the two people that were going to their friend's house. Remember, that's the one I was talking about. You don't actually see them.
Yeah. Okay, so if you're only counting werewolf David deaths, then you count 9. But overall, it's like at least 19 to 22, somewhere in there somewhere. I don't know. It's up there.
I still think 9's low, even if you are just counting David's. But I mean, I would have to actually go back and watch it frame by frame to count it out.
Yeah.
But
Oh.
Did you know that John Landis briefly appeared in the film near the end? He is the.
No, I didn't see him.
Yeah, he's the bearded man who gets hit by a car and thrown through the plate glass window in Piccadilly Circus as all the shit's popping off.
Oh, wait, he's the second guy hit then. Okay. Yeah, I didn't even
go back and watch it to try to catch it, but yeah.
I wasn't even looking for him in this movie. I wasn't looking for his Hitchcock moment where he's, in the movie somewhere. That's interesting.
Yeah. I don't know if you watched the credits, but did you see in the credits that Miss Piggy and Kermit the Frog are actually credited as themselves in the credits.
Yeah, I saw the first time I watched the movie. I left the credits rolling. Yeah.
Well, there's a reason for that. The episode of The Muppet Show playing on television during David's nightmare sequence is called Senior Wincy's, which came out in 1980.
Oh.
But the portion shown was never shown in the United States. This is why Americans often assumed that it was a fake episode. And it's also why Miss Piggy and Kermit the Frog are actually credited as themselves in the credits.
Okay, so wait, this was a Universal picture. Didn't Disney own the Muppets at that time, or who owned the Muppets?
You know, I'm not 100% sure who owned them at the time.
Okay, because I don't think Disney owned them in 81 or 80 or whatever.
I don't think either.
I could have swore that they were a Disney property. I don't know. I may be wrong. But I don't think Universal owns the Muppets, though. I don't think that they do. They may have at that point in time, or they may just gotten permission to use them. I don't know, whatever. But, yeah, I thought it was odd, seeing Miss Piggy and Kermit doing the thing in a werewolf, flick. But, hey, it's all good. I mean, American Psycho had porno and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so, do what you do, right? It's all good.
Let's see. Also, one of the real reason why John Landis chose London as the setting was because he was quoted as saying London was horror central, of course, home to Jack the Ripper and Jekyll and Hyde. So I wanted all that Victorian Gothic, but I also wanted to show the real London as it existed in 1981. Fair enough. I mean,
yeah.
You say it like that. I mean, obviously, Jack the Ripper is kind of for better or worse, is kind of a legendary tale. Jekyll and Hyde, while fiction, is still set in London and very much part of the London zeitgeist. So, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, well, didn't they even mention the cab driver mentions the no. He's talking about Sweeney Todd, the demon barber of Bleach Street, or whatever. He's talking about Sweeney Todd, which I always thought Sweeney Todd was a character based off of Jack the Ripper. I don't know where I got that, but I always thought it was. I'm not for sure, but I can see that.
Yeah, I had been. What's up, AJ? What's going on, brother? Let's see. In one of the pictures I haven't gotten to use today, jump scare. Hopefully, it jumps out at you guys like that. that's actually one of my favorite.
That to me looks like vampire. That I don't see werewolf in that. I see vampire.
Kind of, yeah. David Naughton actually revealed that the hospital bed in the forest scene, which is what you're seeing on the screen right now, was the most difficult and painful to shoot because of the glass contact lenses he had to use. I actually remember watching the making of Thriller, and I remember Michael Jackson saying when he was being interviewed for that he had to constantly get eye drops and stuff like that in between takes because after you go through one or two takes, these things would start to burn. They were really.
Could you imagine putting glass on your eyeballs? Jesus, that's
the way it was done back then, man. Nowadays the eye stuff is all done with CGI. For those of you who don't know,
well, now they make regular contact lenses that have different colors. I've worn them on Halloween before.
Yeah, but for the most part in the movies, it's all CGI. It's like Spider-Man. Whenever like Deadpool, whenever you see the guys with the masks, the eyes are actually empty. The eyes of the mask itself physically are actually cut out.
Yeah.
All the emotive eye stuff, especially for Spider-Man, is actually done in post-production. It's all CGI.
Well, yes, so they can make the eyes more expressive when Deadpool or Spider-Man talks. They can go bigger or smaller or whatever. Yeah, no, that's always been one of those things.
Yeah, but that seems like a good place to start wrapping things up. I think you've listened to me and Tex blather on about this movie long enough. AJ, you came in at the last couple minutes, but hey, glad you could be here. Go back and check it out from the beginning if you want.
Rewind, AJ.
Yeah, so I'll go to you first, Tex. Final thoughts, quick paragraph, overall thoughts of An American Werewolf in London.
tremendous film, required viewing for 80s horror fan or scary movie fan or werewolf, whatever. Like I said, to me, this is as good as this movie is, it's not quite as good as The Howling, because I think The Howling is tremendous. But I would, I'd be happy with either film. Rick Baker's work, legendary. John Landis, the guy's a legend. This is the best looking werewolf I think we've ever gotten on camera to this date. And if you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's a lot of fun. It's 97 minutes and it goes by very fast. You'll have fun with this one. I promise you.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with everything Tech said. I think the movie works at a couple different levels. It's great horror in spots. It's good comedy in other spots. It's generally speaking, I agree that I think The Howling is a much better horror film.
I do too.
Howling
1, not the rest of them. The rest of them are garbage. Just watch the first one.
But yeah, I think both these are good films. I do like this one. I like David Naughton in the role. I don't think it could have been cast much better. I'm very glad that we did not do this with Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. As fun as that movie could have been, I like what we got. Again, John Landis, hopefully one of these days somebody will look back at his career and be able to look past some of the stuff surrounding the Twilight Zone movie. We'll be able to see exactly how good of a filmmaker he is. Spies Like Us is one that's coming up in the near future, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be doing that review. That's one of my favorite 80s movies of all time, a great comedy, Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd.
I don't think I've ever seen Spies Like Us. That'll be another first-time watch for me.
Oh, it's a good one. It's a good 80s comedy. It's a good one. You'll like it. I think now
I appreciate 80s comedy.
There's a lot of hot chicks, a lot of kind of slapstick humor. I think you're going to enjoy it for not being a horror movie. I think you're going to watch this movie and be like, damn, this is actually pretty impressive. It's going to be one of the non-horror movies I think you're going to enjoy.
Right.
But so we'll definitely get around to that one. But yeah, it's overall just a great movie. I think there's a reason why this movie has stood the test of time and why so many people think this movie is one of the greatest of a great decade of films, because this movie hits you from a couple different angles. It's good comedy, good horror, good characters, good writing, good direction. This movie does really hit all these things. It's a lot of great beats, a lot of great acting, a lot of great moments. And like I said, that whole scene in Piccadilly Circus, the ending was a bit sudden. If I'm going to give a negative critique by this movie, the ending was a bit sudden. I would have maybe
it does end quickly.
I would have appreciated maybe a bit of an epilogue after that. Not nothing that stretches into a whole other part of the third act, but I mean, just 2 minutes of something, some expression.
I've always thought the perfect way to end it is all of those souls that were in limbo. You see them just kind of poof away and vanish. Would have been a good ending to the film. I think that would have been the perfect way to send off.
Now, I honestly do not remember seeing American Werewolf in Paris. I don't know if it was a direct sequel or if it was just kind of a spiritual sequel. I think I've seen it once, but I can't remember. I know if I saw it, I only saw it the once.
It takes place in the 90s.
Yeah.
It's got a very 90s feel to it. It's not a bad movie. It's one that I enjoy. I don't rewatch it often. It's very much I think it's more of a spiritual successor, but it's kind of a redo of this movie, if I'm being honest. Just in a 90s tone, whatever. But it's not bad. It's worth watching once if you've never seen it.
Yeah, if you haven't seen An American Werewolf in London, it is still available on Tubi right now for free. Yes. It is supposed to be leaving Tubi very soon, so either go watch it very soon, or it's probably leaving Tubi because it's been licensed to another streaming service. So if you can't catch it on Tubi before it leaves, check the other streaming services, or go online and try to find it. I don't think you can find this free with ads on YouTube, but I don't know. We'll get to it.
I don't think so.
You'll be able to find it someplace, I'm sure. I mean, this isn't one of the movies that's in high demand right now, so I'm willing to bet you're going to find it free to watch on Netflix or Amazon or something pretty soon. But thanks everybody for coming out, hanging out with us. Very much appreciated. AJ came in right at the end. Thanks to BJ for coming and hanging out. Ghost Host, thank you guys very much for coming and hanging out. Casey early on in the stream. Thanks for coming and hanging out. We very much appreciate it. And we will see you guys later. Until then, adios. I mean, they could have a little bit more. I mean, it was the 80s.
if I was going to give my sexual history, I'm going to need like a notepad and a bunch of multiplication times because I'm going to be here for a while. I mean, I've been kind of a whore in my past.
You've been a slut.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. Whenever God said spread thy seed, I used to.